Well, it's been since August that we have had a chance to record a water resources outlook. Now, you've still heard a lot from us between Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael. You've heard from us lots, but we had to skip our water resources outlook at the end of September, so now we're getting back to it. And Chris and I will review how the rain from those storms affected us and what we can expect as hurricane season nears its end, and we look ahead to a potentially busy winter as El Nino has come front and center for us. All this and more in the October edition of the Water Resources Outlook. First, it is important to address our rainfall for the last couple of months. This 60-day departure from normal graphic gives us a pretty good idea of where our hurricanes dropped some rain. Major and record flooding in parts of North and South Carolina in both Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael, and even some in Virginia. Some river basins avoided some of that heavy rain and are now creeping into drought as the lack of rain this fall has caught up with them, as they begin to show some impacts from that dryness. Southeast areas of South Carolina, Georgia, and much of Florida missed out on the heaviest rainfall, with northern and northeast Georgia also not receiving as much rain. The last area in the southeast that did not receive much rain was Virginia, southeast Virginia, and the northeast North Carolina that narrowly missed that heavy rainfall. The next graphic is going to show the 30-day departure from normal, and it is also very interesting. Notice eastern North Carolina. Since the storm, it has been very dry in that area. Hurricane Michael still shows up in this time period, so you can see how much of those areas ended up being hit more than once within a month. It has been a pretty wet fall for much of the southeast, and it looks like that might be what we are looking for in the late fall into winter. But I won't get ahead of myself. First, let's look at the drought monitor, which is depicting the dryness that I talked about in the 60-day departure from normal graphic earlier. The rainfall we are seeing this week should help alleviate some of this drought, and Chris will address the next couple of weeks to see if this graphic could look much different in our next Water Resources Outlook. Stream flows provided by the U.S. Geological Survey reflect a wet fall with most gauges indicating normal to above normal flows for this time of year. Just a few gauges indicate below normal over a 28-day average. So just as a review, here are the hurricane tracks for this year, and note this does not include Michael yet, as the National Hurricane Centers continues to watch the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific basins for development. We have been impacted by 4 storms this year: Alberto in late May, Tropical Storm Gordon in early September, Hurricane Florence through in mid-September, and not shown here, Hurricane Michael, which got us in October. At this time, there are 2 things that are looking good for us. We currently don't have anything developing in the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico that would impact the southeast, and as you can see from this graphic, climatologically, we are ramping down and getting closer to the end of hurricane season. I'm hoping that this is the last time we have to address hurricane season in 2018, but we will be watching for that for you, and will begin decision support briefings soon if it is warranted. So now it's time to let Chris talk to us about what we can expect in the next few weeks.
We're beginning the period with an area of low pressure exiting the southeast. Another low and the associated front will move in after it, but we're not expecting as much in the way of precipitation with this one. High pressure sets up for the early part of the midterm period. The models are showing this area of high pressure shifting eastward, making way for the next system by the latter portion of the midterm period. The 7-day precipitation forecast shows contributions from both the early portion of the short term, mainly in the Carolinas, and then the system late in the midterm. Keep in mind that the midterm event is about a week out, so the forecast will continue to be refined as we get closer to the event. The long-term forecast is for above normal precipitation amounts, with the potential for another low to move in behind the last system.
Well, thank you, Chris. And now I'm going to take us into the long term. And the first thing we're going to talk about, and probably the most important thing we can talk about, is the ENSO forecast, whether we're going to see a La Nina or an El Nino. And here is that forecast through winter into spring. And you can see the red green, and darkly blue shaded lines, and those are the average forecasts of all the ones that you see on here. And what they indicate is that we're expecting temperatures across the equatorial Pacific to remain above normal through the period, keeping us in a weak to moderate El Nino through the winter. And the strength of the El Nino does have an impact on the rainfall in the southeast, so we will be watching it closely through the winter and updating our expectations on the potential rainfall. A stronger El Nino means higher confidence in a wet forecast for the southeast, and also for a warmer forecast in the southeast. And with that, we are leaning towards a warmer than normal forecast and an above normal rainfall forecast for the beginning of this period. So this is the November outlook for the southeast U.S. As we look a little further out, we see the above normal kind of gets washed out in the southeast U.S. We have equal chances of above, below, and near normal temperatures, and part of the reason is that our temperatures tend not to fluctuate quite as much during that time. We tend to, with a lot of rain in the area, we tend to have not quite as higher highs and not quite as lower lows. So we tend to be near normal for that time. And so, as I mentioned before, in addition to having probably normal temperatures, we also continue to have the chance for above normal rainfall the seasonal period between November and January of 2019. And that doesn't stop. Our seasonal forecast for February through April is a continuation of the above normal rain, as El Nino is expected to continue through the spring. And so, the bottom line for today is, in the short term, we are nearing the end of hurricane season, and hopefully we're fortunate enough not to see any more tropical weather in the southeast. But we're looking at maybe normal late fall weather as more fronts start to bring rain to the southeast. So our just like what's happened over the last week, we'll start to see those fronts come through, and associated with those fronts will be some rainfall with them. And so that's kind of for the short term. As we get into the long term, we'll be continued active as that frontal type rainfall instead of the tropical rain continues. And it's looking right now like an active winter flood season. And so we'll plan to talk about that again. Our next water resources outlook is going to come near the end of the month again next month. So we plan to record it on November 27th, 2018. And so we'll look forward to talking to you then. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you next month.